Hello and welcome to this trip back in time through the history of Total War Warhammer. This series of videos will give you some insights into the history of the game and how each DLC and major updates impacted the game and where exactly everything is now. Today we're going to cover the first ever DLC to launch with Warhammer 1, the Warriors of Chaos. Originally, they were a pre-order exclusive faction before later being added as a separate DLC, and are priced today at £5.99 on Steam. The DLC added the faction to the original Warhammer 1 campaign, and since they were added, they have hardly changed at all. They still start in the same part of the map, have the same 3 legendary lords, the same units, the same mechanics, and the same everything that they had when they were introduced all those years ago. This makes them into a time capsule all of their own, since you can play them today and get a good idea of how factions used to be way back when, though if you want to do that, you could always play Total War Warhammer 1. Unsurprisingly, as the only faction representing Chaos on launch, fans had high hopes, and boy oh boy were they in for some extreme levels of disappointment. Aside from the swarms of fans complaining about the fact that this was essentially a day 1 DLC, people seemed to actually like the faction. At the time, they were the only Horde faction in the game, and this made their campaign feel, well, chaotic compared to the rest. However, as the game went on and Chaos received no updates, bonus free DLC or DLC, and hardly any tweaks, fans started to realise just how bare bones they were. As I mentioned earlier, in the game today, you can play them in Mortal Empires, and they still start in the same place and have the same mechanics as they always have, and this is where the cracks in the faction become the most obvious. To keep things as simple as possible, they are a Horde faction where all the units are there because they want to create chaos, and yet, you still need to pay them upkeep, and it's not an insignificant amount either. The army also feels half-baked, with a tiny roster with many areas feeling very weak and having no options for certain kinds of units. This results in a very bland playstyle and all of your armies pretty much being built out the same. The mechanics are also so basic that they feel like the template for a faction before anything unique has been added to them. That being said, if you're looking for a simple faction to mindlessly raise the world as, with constant battling and decent challenge, then I can honestly recommend giving them a go. When I played them, I was very pleasantly surprised to learn that they're actually a lot of fun, if a little bare bones. There are a few factions that give you the same level of blind enjoyment that you get when you're walking through enemies turn 3 with Kolek, or getting off a huge cast with Archeon, or listening to Siggy lay the fattest bars.
Sickly, sinful spectacles stand, shuffle, shamble and saunter shamelessly in mine scandalized sight.
Now thankfully, the Warriors of Chaos didn't set the bar for all future DLCs, and to this day, I think there are very few, if any, pieces of paid content that quite lived up to these less than brilliant standards. Of course, that's aside from the very next piece of major DLC, and this time it's one that did get fixed, but it took 5 years before that happened. But there was one other piece of content that came out between now and then, and it's one of the all-time controversial staples of the Total War series, Blood for the Blood God. Yeah, this video was super short, so I bundled these two pieces of non-content together to get them out of the way and also, pad the runtime. Now, if you're not aware, the Blood for the Blood God was the first independent piece of DLC for Warhammer 1, and all it adds to the game is blood and a couple of animations to display said blood. So it's a purely cosmetic DLC that costs £2.49. Yikes. Now, there is actually a good reason for this. From what I can tell, to allow Total War Warhammer or any Total War game to be released and not have it rated 18, they must remove all the blood. This allows the game to be rated as a 16, and thus they're allowed to advertise it in different ways and promote it a lot better, and generally it results in a lot more sales. It's kind of like the difference between making an Avengers movie and making Deadpool. Yes, Deadpool did exceptionally well, but it's an R-rated movie, which does cut out a lot of your younger audience that might want to go see it. Now, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, nor do I specialize in this sort of thing, so I'm of course paraphrasing, but when you think about it like this, you can at least understand it. However, a lot of people still understandably hate this practice, as it is literally paying for something that should really be in the game all along. And if we do have to pay for it, then it better be for pennies rather than pounds. Nevertheless, Blood for the Blood God is fun if you pick it up cheap for adding tons of the red stuff to your battles, and helps add that extra layer of cinematic quality, especially if you're into content creation. And that wraps up this very brief video on the history of Warhammer 2, the Warriors of Chaos, and the Blood for the Blood God. I do hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then do be sure to leave it a like. It really does help out the channel so very much. And if you want to see more content like this on Total War Warhammer, of course we've got news coming every single week now, so be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell notification so you never miss a thing. I'd like to take this time to thank all supporters of the channel, here on YouTube as well as on Patreon and on Twitch. In particular, Kobe Said So and It's Your Boy LC for their wonderful support at the Unclean Ones tier. I really cannot thank each and every one of you wonderful supporters enough. One more thank you for watching, and for now, I've been COLONELDAMNEDERS, and I will see you next turn.